The wooden doors of Courtroom 3B creaked open with a sound that seemed to echo longer than it should have. Heads turned as Alana Monroe stepped inside. No handcuffs, no entourage. Just a black woman in a navy blazer walking into a space designed to diminish people like her. She didn't rush. She didn't explain. She simply walked. A murmur rippled through the gallery like static electricity. When she reached the defense table, it stood empty. No attorney, no family, just polished wood reflecting fluorescent lights. Judge Gregory Langford raised an eyebrow, his voice dripping with theatrical amusement. "Miss Monroe, representing yourself. I see. A bold choice for someone facing charges of assaulting a police officer." Alana stood perfectly still. "I was assaulted, Your Honor. I'm just defending the truth." Langford chuckled, flipping through his folder as if her words were background noise. "We'll let the facts decide that, shall we?" From across the room, Assistant District Attorney Jessica Rayner rose with practiced precision. "Your Honor, on the evening of May 12th, Miss Monroe was stopped by Officer Brent Colby for questioning. According to the official report, she became verbally aggressive, refused to comply with lawful orders, and physically resisted when Officer Colby attempted to detain her. He suffered bruising to his wrist. We will present video footage and witness statements to confirm this account." Alana turned toward the gallery, her voice carrying despite its quiet tone. "There is video, but I'd like the jury to see what happens before it begins, and more importantly, what's missing." "You'll have your chance," Jessica replied curtly. "Will I?" Alana asked, turning slowly toward the bench. "Because so far, the only privilege I've been given is standing here while others decide whether I should be allowed to speak." From the audience, a boy no older than 10 leaned toward his mother. "What did she do wrong?" he whispered. His mother glanced down, hesitated. "She disrespected a police officer." Everyone heard it. Everyone understood the weight of those words. Langford tapped his pen against his folder. "Let's keep this moving. Miss Monroe, this court doesn't run on feelings." Alana didn't blink. "Apparently not, but it seems to run just fine on fear." "Excuse me?" She met his gaze steadily. "Fear of someone who doesn't shout, who doesn't fight back, someone who doesn't play the part you've written." The room stirred. One juror shifted uncomfortably. "Objection," Jessica cut in sharply. "The defendant is making inflammatory statements." "Sustained," Langford said. "Miss Monroe, you're not here to perform a monologue." Alana smiled faintly. "If being silent keeps me alive, I'll save my words for when they matter." For the first time, the courtroom didn't know how to react. There was something unsettling in her calm. Not arrogance, not defiance, but precision. Like she already knew how this story would end. Officer Brent Colby entered the courtroom with the confidence of someone who knew the system was built for him. He glanced at Alana once, then looked away. But Alana didn't look at him at all. Her eyes remained fixed on the judge, watching like someone who'd been watching all along. On the witness stand, Colby sat straight, hands resting on his knees as if he had nothing to hide. "She got loud," he said, eyes fixed on the jury. "She refused every order. I told her to stop moving. Instead, she started yelling and reached inside her coat. Quick movement. I thought she was going for a weapon. I reacted how I was trained to react. I protected myself." He paused, letting the silence carry the weight of his words. It wasn't just testimony, it was performance, and he knew exactly how to deliver his lines. "What injuries did you sustain, officer?" Langford asked. "Mild sprain, right wrist. She resisted when I tried to detain her." Jessica rose smoothly. "We'll now play security footage from the incident." The lights dimmed as a monitor flickered to life. "The prosecution submits this as State's Exhibit 1. The footage showed a parking lot. Alana stood next to her car as Officer Colby approached. The two appeared to speak, then without warning, the footage jumped forward. Suddenly, Alana was on the ground, arms pinned. The room buzzed with murmurs. "Due to a malfunction in the department's storage system, part of the recording was corrupted," Jessica explained smoothly. "But what remains confirms Officer Colby's testimony. Miss Monroe refused to comply and was restrained accordingly." Alana stood slowly. Your Honor, I'd like to request access to the raw surveillance file. Uncut. I believe what's missing wasn't corrupted by accident. Langford looked unimpressed. Unless you have technical proof to support such an accusation, I won't waste this court's time with theories. The footage has been submitted properly, Jessica added. If she believes something improper occurred, she's welcome to file an external complaint. But that's outside the scope of this proceeding. Alana's voice remained even and sharp. We both know why that footage vanished. And it's not a technical error. Langford's eyes narrowed. You're skating dangerously close to contempt. Alana didn't step back. Instead, she looked directly at the jury. What you see is what they've chosen to leave. But the truth is in what's missing, and they know it. A few jurors shifted in their seats. One crossed her arms tighter. The defense is making unsupported allegations, Jessica said quickly. There is no evidence of tampering. Langford banged his gavel once, hard enough to silence the tension but not the doubt. Enough, Miss Monroe. You will stick to facts, not fantasies. As Alana returned to her seat, she noticed an older black man in the back row, Leonard Carter, retired courthouse doorman with 32 years in this very building. He'd opened doors for judges and janitors, watched trials from the sidelines, and learned to keep quiet in places where speaking up meant trouble. Leonard's mind traveled back years to a different courtroom, a different trial, but the same faces, of power. A young black boy had stood trial for a robbery he didn't commit. Leonard had watched the boy tremble in a shirt too big and shoes too thin. When the guilty verdict came, the boy's mother cried out and the bailiff escorted her away before her son could even say goodbye. Leonard remembered gripping the brass door handle so hard his palm ached for days. But he also remembered something else. In the front row that day, quiet and still, sat a little girl who couldn't have been more than 10. She didn't cry or speak. She just stared, watching, learning. The same steady gaze he now saw in Alana Monroe. She was that child. And now, she was here on trial, facing a room just as indifferent. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Leonard gave a quiet nod, barely noticeable. Alana didn't nod back, but she blinked once, slowly. That was enough. No one else saw it, but it happened. And Leonard Carter, who had seen so many moments wasted and lost, leaned back and whispered, under his breath, "This time someone will listen." Without warning, Alana stood and slowly removed her blazer. The fabric fell away to reveal deep purple bruises on her wrists and upper arms, swollen ridges that told a story no one had dared to write down. A hush fell over the courtroom. Your Honor, this is a stunt, Jessica began, but Langford didn't. Stop, Alana. He just narrowed his eyes, his lips curling into that familiar smirk. Alana walked forward and placed a thick sealed envelope on the clerk's desk. This is a sealed internal affairs dossier. 11 years of filed complaints and unresolved investigations into Officer Brent Colby. That's inadmissible without verification, Rayner protested. Alana met her eyes. Then verify it, but until then, it's more honest than anything he said today. This courtroom doesn't operate on drama, Miss Monroe, Langford said. You will sit down. Instead, Alana reached for her phone and made a single call. Micah Green. Protocol 11. Activate silently. She hung up without explanation, but that name, that phrase, hovered in the air like electricity. From the gallery, Leonard Carter leaned forward. He didn't know the full weight of what she'd just said, but the shift in her posture, the authority behind her calm, it told him something had changed. As Alana returned to her seat, she caught her reflection in the old polished trim of the jury box. She paused and whispered, just audible to those nearby. They want silence? Let's show them what silence can see. Behind closed doors in the judge's chambers, 3 figures huddled under dim light. Judge Langford sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled. District Attorney Jessica Rayner clutched a thin folder. Police Chief Callahan stood with arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. We have a problem, Jessica said, her voice tight. The footage is missing, yes, but something about her doesn't sit right. Her background doesn't match. There's no employment record, no current residential listing that leads anywhere. Langford leaned forward. So what you're saying is she's not who she claims to be? Callahan shook his head. Or she's exactly who we hope she isn't. Langford stood, walking to the small window overlooking the courthouse lawn. Then we drown her. Not with noise, with silence. We bury her in procedures, delay every request, overrule her objections. Let her wither in the system she thinks she can expose. And if she speaks again? Jessica asked. Make sure no one listens. A heavy pause followed before Callahan broke it. Then we bring in Valerie. Moments later, Officer Valerie Royce stepped inside, blonde hair pulled back tightly, steps confident, uniform, impeccable. Langford pushed a manila folder toward her. She opened it to reveal one photo, Alana Monroe. She doesn't look like much, Valerie said, but her tone made it clear she'd already sized Alana up as a threat. She's more dangerous than she appears, Callahan replied coldly. Valerie closed the folder. Then I'll make sure she disappears the moment she steps out of line. This cannot get messy, Jessica cautioned. No bruises, no press. Valerie gave her a thin smile. Messy isn't my style. Clean and irreversible works just fine. As Valerie left, she paused at the door. If she reaches for the mic again, I'll make sure she never finishes her sentence. Back in the courtroom, tension crackled like electricity before a storm. Alana stood once more, her posture composed yet unyielding. Why is asking for the full video considered disruption? She asked. The silence that followed wasn't uncertainty. It was strategy. Judge Langford leaned forward slowly, lips curling into that too calm smirk. This court will not tolerate theatrics, Miss Monroe. You are out of order. Then let the record show that truth itself is what you consider disorder. Murmurs began in the gallery. A rustle of coats, sharp breaths. Bailiff, Langford commanded, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Remove the defendant from the courtroom. Valerie Royce stepped forward, her boots striking the floor with precision. She didn't look at the judge. She didn't need to. Her eyes were already locked on Alana. Alana didn't flinch as Valerie reached for the handcuffs, twisting one arm behind her back, then the other. The steel clicked shut. Hard. Too hard. A gasp rang out from the middle of the gallery. An older woman had stood up, her gloved hand pressed over her mouth. This is wrong. She didn't do anything. This is wrong. Her voice cracked, and she sat back down before the bailiff even glanced her way. But her cry had landed, splintering the stillness. Valerie leaned close and whispered, Not so strong now, are you? Alana turned her head slightly and replied in a voice that stayed impossibly calm. Strength isn't how tight you squeeze a wrist. It's how steady your eyes stay when the truth's in pain. As Valerie pulled hard, jerking Alana's body, she didn't cry out or resist. She looked directly at the judge and spoke loud enough for the room to hear. Make sure your robe is clean, Judge. Cameras are watching. For just a heartbeat, Langford's face flickered, a twitch in his brow, a tightening of his mouth. Then he recovered. Take her out. The moment had come. Calmly, deliberately, Alana reached into her folder and pulled out a metal badge. Under the pale courthouse lights, the words glinted clearly. Deputy Director, Internal Affairs Division, FBI, her. Voice cut through the silence like a blade. My name is Alana Monroe. I am not just the accused, I am the one investigating all of you. Judge Langford shot up from the bench, scrambling for control. This is outrageous. I will not allow this courtroom to be hijacked by... Before he could finish, the courtroom doors burst open. Micah Green stepped inside, composed and steady. Behind him walked two men in gray suits, their eyes sharp and unreadable. One approached the judge's bench, dropped a folder with a federal seal, and spoke firmly. Federal order. Step aside, Your Honor. A ripple moved through the room, whispers, then gasps. Valerie, who had once gripped Alana's wrists so tightly she drew blood, stepped back instinctively. The contempt in her eyes was gone, replaced by confusion and, for the first time, fear. At the prosecution table, Jessica tried to gather her things quietly, but one of the federal agents intercepted her. He handed her a sealed envelope without a word. Federal subpoena. You're required to appear before an internal tribunal. Jessica's face twitched, her jaw clenched, but whatever defense she'd prepared dissolved in her throat. Alana stepped into the center of the courtroom, her movements slow and deliberate. This was the same place where she'd been publicly accused, humiliated, and silenced. Now it became the place where she reclaimed every ounce of stolen dignity. She looked directly at Langford, then turned to the rows of people who had judged her with their silence. Her voice came low and steady, each word landing like a gavel strike. We don't knock twice. You heard the knock. This is the entry. No one dared respond. The room was still, not from shock alone, but from the weight of realization. Alana wasn't just defending herself. She had been watching, documenting, waiting. Now the moment had come, and it was no longer their courtroom. It was hers. With a click that echoed in the silence, Micah Green turned on the projector. Grainy security footage began to play on the wall, but this time it wasn't edited, muted, or cut. It showed everything. The courtroom watched in breathless stillness as the full truth unfolded. The footage showed Brent Colby shoving Alana against a patrol car, twisting her wrists behind her back with brutal force. Her voice, calm and non-threatening, was drowned out by his yelling. When she winced in pain and tried to ask what was happening, he slammed her head forward. No weapon, no resistance, just fear and force. Gasps erupted across the room. Langford's gavel did not come down. He sat frozen. Then another sound filled the courtroom, a voice recording, grainy but unmistakable. We need to keep this under wraps. If she's who we think she is, we bury it. That was Langford. I've already deleted the segments. Colby knows not to talk. Rayner's voice, sharp and urgent. We can't let this go up the chain. She's just one woman. Make her disappear. Callahan. The room stirred, energy rising. People turned to one another, their faces twisting in disbelief. Leonard Carter, who had sat quietly in the back, stood slowly. He was holding a folded, worn piece of paper, something that had aged with him. He walked to the front without asking permission. I was there, he said, his voice shaking but firm. 20 years ago I saw them do it to a boy just like they did to her. I wrote it down, I kept it. And today I'm not staying silent. He handed the paper to Micah. Alana nodded gently, as if she'd always known he'd find the strength. The courtroom felt like it cracked open. A woman in the front row, the same older woman who had wept earlier, let out a sob, covering her face with trembling hands. Judge Langford didn't move. His face was pale, lips drawn tight, eyes darting like a man trapped by truth with nowhere left to look. Alana stepped forward, her presence filling the room, but she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Justice isn't delayed. It's arrived. And it's watching. Every word landed like a verdict, and no one could deny what they had seen. For the first time, the courtroom felt like a place where truth was louder than power. The story that started in a forgotten courtroom quickly ignited across the country. Within hours, news vans circled the courthouse like vultures sensing a reckoning. Headlines flashed across national broadcasts. Federal agent uncovers corruption. In live trial, and Deputy FBI Director exposes systemic abuse. Social media erupted. The hashtag #StandWithAlana trended within the hour, crossing 1 million uses by nightfall. But it wasn't the famous voices that gave the moment weight. It was the ordinary ones. People shared their own stories. Mothers posted about their sons. Fathers posted about their fears. It became more than a hashtag. It became a mirror. On a nearby news segment, a young black law student, barely 20, stood outside the courthouse with tears in his eyes. The anchor held out a microphone, but he didn't wait for a question. She didn't just speak for herself, he said. She spoke for all of us. That clip traveled faster than any press release, landing in inboxes, group chats, boardrooms, and classrooms. It became the sound of a generation finding its voice. The ripple effects hit harder than anyone expected. Valerie, the officer who had grabbed Alana so carelessly, was placed on immediate suspension pending investigation. Sheriff Callahan resigned that morning. No press conference, just a typed letter left on his desk. In Washington, the Department of Justice held a closed-door session. One photo leaked. Alana Monroe standing beside the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI. No smile, no podium, just three people who understood exactly what silence had cost and what truth had reclaimed. Alana didn't give interviews. She didn't need to. Her silence was already speaking louder than most could ever shout. But when asked to appear before a special hearing on police accountability, she accepted. She entered the chamber in the same dark suit she'd worn in court. No jewelry, no makeup, just presence. When the committee chair asked what she believed, justice should look like moving forward, she said simply. Justice doesn't need to raise its voice. It just needs to be heard without being interrupted. The room fell quiet because everyone knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It never really was. That week, universities requested transcripts of the trial for curriculum. Faith leaders led sermons on moral courage. A mural of Alana appeared on a brick wall downtown, painted overnight. It showed her standing tall in court, with the words, "Silence when rooted in truth is louder than a gavel." For the first time in a long time, people didn't just watch history. They felt part of it. The sun was beginning to slip behind the courthouse when Alana stepped onto the steps. A warm breeze carried the murmur of voices, then the sound grew louder, not in anger but in something quieter and deeper. Applause. It started with just a few hands but spread like ripples on still water. People stood and clapped, some with tears in their eyes, others with fists clenched not in rage but in reverence. Alana didn't wave or smile. Her expression remained composed, but behind her eyes was the weight of everything that had just happened. She had not come to win, she had come to reveal. And sometimes that was heavier than any verdict. Leonard Carter made his way through the crowd, his steps slow but steady. When he reached her, he didn't ask for a photo or shake her hand. He just leaned in slightly and said, "Thank you for being louder than the rest of us ever dared to be." She met his gaze and held it long enough for him to know his words had landed. Later, that evening, Alana returned to her office, the same small room where she had first reviewed the file that started it all. Her desk was cluttered, the overhead light buzzed faintly, and in the corner sat a stack of folders marked Internal Audit. She sat down, removed her blazer, and rolled up her sleeves. There was still work to do. Outside, her name was being chanted. On college campuses, printed on signs added to school curriculums. But inside these walls, she was just another federal officer trying to undo decades of damage, one thread at a time. She began mapping out a new protocol, one that would prevent another Brent Colby, another Rayner, another Langford from rising. Through unchecked cracks. Somewhere down the hall, someone dropped a file. She didn't flinch. She just kept writing, because Alana Monroe didn't fight for attention. She fought for silence to mean safety again, not fear. Sometimes silence is survival, but sometimes silence is the battle cry. And in living rooms across the country, people sat still, holding their breath without realizing it. Not because of what had been said, but because of what had finally been heard.